It's been 2 weeks since Michael passed, and I have not been in front of a camera once all that time. As much as a part of me has wanted to step up and pay tribute, a bigger part of me has been drawn towards processing memories without making media. On the night Michael died, I went to 125th Street to join in with the spontaneous memorial that jumped off in front of the Apollo. And the scene I found there fascinated me because it was this crazy mix of powerful human emotion and bizarro media circus at the same time. You could totally feel how there was this genuine outpouring of love going on around you, but you could also feel everyone's awareness that they had all these TV cameras on them, and you couldn't help but notice how more than half of us had cameras of our own. And after a while, I started to feel like we were all caught up in this collective ritual of trying to process our own grief by making media out of it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but I couldn't help thinking how this mix of deep human connection and weird media circus was a perfect metaphor for Michael's career, and how in a lot of ways the curse of Michael's life was that almost every second of it was defined by our ability to make media out of him. Because of this gift that he was born with to connect with us through the camera and the microphone, Michael, by his own account, started life being raised by a dad who was developing a brand instead of nurturing a child. And he was taught from the earliest age that the only kind of love he was meant to receive is the love that a consumer gives to a product. And if you have to try and build a sense of self based on that kind of love with no other foundation, you're never going to be a whole human being, and you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to fill holes that kind of love can't fill. And by all appearances, that's the trap Michael fell into. This life based on commodifying the beauty within him brought so much ugliness upon him that eventually it made him want to flee from his own beauty and turn himself ugly, as well as quite possibly doing ugly things to people. And the more we got to know him as this mix of tremendous gifts and tremendous dysfunction, the more he became surrounded by people who wanted to profit off his gifts by exploiting his dysfunction, and were perfectly happy to let the cycle continue, even after all of us could see that it was eating him alive. It's like the most tragic story ever. And yet, at the center of all that tragedy, this same camera and microphone that gave him a life without peace also filled his life with these transcendent moments of grace. They let him connect with us in that way that only an artist can, and share that purest kind of joy that only an artist can create. And with these tools, he got to share that with us a billion at a time. You can dismiss it as a superficial pop phenomenon if you want to, but the fact remains, Michael Jackson spread joy and spread a message of love on a grander scale than possibly any artist in all of human history with this camera and microphone. Michael's life contains many different stories with many different morals, but more than anything, to me, Michael's life is a parable about this right here, this limitless opportunity for liberation and for imprisonment that the camera and the microphone provide. The paradox of trying to reconcile this human connection we make between artist and audience, and the dehumanizing connection these tools create between consumer and mass media products. It's the struggle that every artist faces nowadays more than ever, figuring out how to balance these two opposing forces and keep yourself whole. Over the years, we've seen so many of our brightest lights, from Lauren and D'Angelo on down, seem like they couldn't quite figure out how to strike that balance. And as today's media landscape pulls us all toward trying to validate our life by making media out of it, our kids may well be born into a world where everyone has to struggle with that balance. So I'm hoping that as we look back on Michael in years to come, somewhere in the million strands of his life, there are some lessons we can use to help the next generation find that balance that Michael never found. Now, there are a lot of people who say that Michael just wasn't meant to find that balance, that if he didn't have all that struggle and suffering, that if he didn't live through all that ugliness, he wouldn't have had the drive to create all that beauty, and that was just how it had to be. There are a lot of people who believe that, but I don't believe that. I can't believe that. I have to believe that for our next generation of Laurens and D'Angelos, for our children that are born with a little bit of Michael's gift inside them, I have to believe that we can learn how to do better for them and give them a life where they have a chance to shine and have a chance to live. I have to believe that we can do that. When I went to 125th Street that first night, there was one woman who had set down all of her pictures of Michael on the pavement and started looking down at Michael's face and dancing for him, doing her best impersonation of all of Michael's dances. And she was nice with it. So right away, a crowd started gathering. But as she looked up and saw all of us with all of our cameras, you could tell she was really ambivalent about having us watch. Because even though obviously she came here to perform in the street, this was really a strictly personal thing that she wanted wanted to do for Michael to show her love for him. And after a while, she actually looked up at all of us and said, "You can film this if you want to, but I'm here to give my love to Michael, and that's not about these cameras." And then she looked down and blocked everyone out and went back to dancing for Michael. And as I watched that scene go down and watched her struggle to find that balance, it made me wish more than anything that somehow little 8-year-old Michael could be here to catch this moment. It made me wish he'd had the chance to know, to really truly know, that he was meant to be loved in a way that wasn't about those cameras. And when I look at the future for this next generation of kids, which includes Michael's children, and see them entering a world that's defined more than ever by these cameras, my hope is that we'll remember Michael by learning whatever we can learn from him to make sure that this next generation grows up knowing that they deserve to be loved in a way that's not about these cameras.